Was it the Bible Society that just released a study about
Yes.
young people
A
going
Pew
back to
study,
church
Bible Society, yeah.
at a quite incredible increase of people? And it wasn't, I think the thing that surprised me was not just that people were beginning to like believe in God again or something, but to attend church.
Yes.
Which is quite a thing in itself. I mean, I agree with people like Justin Brierley when they say that, I don't know if the statistics bear this out, but I can kind of feel something in the air, like the conversation's shifting a little bit.
Yes.
And I was sort of like, okay, I can feel that too. But if church attendance is going up, I think that's quite an important indicator. These discussions, I agree. The important question is, like with Christianity, Jesus. And for me, it's quite straightforward, as I feel like it might be for you too, in that if somebody says, well, what about this thing that these Christians did? If the question is whether Christianity is true, then the question is wholly, would Jesus have condoned or commanded such a thing? And if the answer is no, then it's not an objection at all. But the fear that someone like Christopher Hitchens has is that the kind of certainty that comes along with that conviction, which, as you've just explained, like when somebody has a religious experience, that is what compels them. And it happens in a way that is indescribable and is immune to any kind of scientific or philosophical inquiry. But that certainty can then spill over into areas where it doesn't belong, such as certainty on doctrine, certainty on moral practices specific to our current time that weren't discussed by Jesus, for example. And I think that's the kind of fear that he had. And you've debated these people. I think you in a way, you were an important part of the New Atheist movement as one of the key figures in opposition. You've debated at this Oxford Union. I should mention we are filming this in the Oxford Union, who have very gracefully lent us this wonderful Goodman library. They're currently fundraising for a restoration project of some beautiful paintings they have at the top of their old library. So for people listening, there's going to be a link in the description for a fundraiser to help keep this wonderful building and this institution of debate and discussion in action. That's in the description. You've debated in the chamber across the way. You've debated Christopher Hitchens. You've debated Richard Dawkins. What do you think was going on with New Atheism? Why was that something that was so popular, and why was it so difficult for someone like Christopher Hitchens to see that all of his criticisms were journalistic? They were about religion as an institution on earth. And what would you say to quell his concerns that it is that religious impulse, that experience that somebody knows they have God on their side, that gives them the license to do all kinds of evil?
Yes. Looking back, Alex, I wish I'd had more time with Hitchens. I liked Hitchens.
Mm-hmm.
And answering your question is difficult because I sense its thrust and its power, actually, because it seems to me a very valid thing that certainty can become what I call fundamentalist certainty. And I think that's what you're referring to, where people are so certain that their receptors are completely closed to anything else.
Right.
And that justifies almost any kind of behavior. And that's appalling. And I asked myself, what has saved me from that? Because as I sit talking to you, I have that sense of certainty of my relationship with God. I think what has helped me immensely in life is that I've been very privileged to, how shall I put it? I've been prepared for the last 70 years or more to be vulnerable. In other words, I'm always prepared to question what I believe. And I have seen in my life the sadness that comes about when people become fundamentalist in any direction. And I was very honoured to be invited by the British Academy some years ago to give a lecture on, wait for it, scientific fundamentalism, which I think is a much better expression than scientism.
Okay.
Science is the only way to truth. And what fascinated me that day, I was terrified, going into the British Academy and all the academicians there and so on, was the positive response was absolutely amazing. The talk was eventually published in a book. But I've always been afraid of that. I suppose because I was brought up in a culture where my own family suffered bombing because of that kind of attitude. My father ran a business, and just your listeners and people watching this will be interested to know that in a country where there's huge tension between Catholics and Protestants that was fomented by a lot of extremists on both sides, my dad employed equally, as far as he could, Protestants and Catholics in his shop in the centre of one of the most difficult towns in the country. And because of that, I said, Dad, this is really dangerous. Why do you do it? And I'll never forget his answer. He said, son, Scripture teaches us that every man and woman, irrespective of what they believe, is made in the image of God, and I intend to treat them like that. Now, that was amazing. That and the fact that they let me think were two of the biggest things they could have given me. But that as a moral guide has been very important to me in life. In other words, translating it, I can learn from everybody. And when I arrived in Cambridge, week number 1, I looked around looking for someone who did not share my background. And I've been doing it ever since. And I think, and it might sound arrogant to say this, but I think the way in which God helped save me from that kind of cocksuredness that legitimizes any behavior is that I'm constantly prepared to listen, seriously listen, to people that don't share my worldview. And so when I debated the people you've mentioned, I prepared, read all their books so far as I could, and thought through how seriously am I to take this. And I think my confidence, and I prefer to use the word confidence than being cocksure, has grown because of those exposures. But I'm still ready at the age of 81 to take the argument seriously because many other people are facing these arguments and discussions. And my little contribution, I think, to the debate is to show that there's another side. And I remember the little story about Richard Dawkins that may interest you. The first debate we did in Alabama, of all places.
Yeah.
He, at the beginning, we were chatting together, and he said, I don't debate. And I said, well, if it's any consolation, I don't. I'd never done a debate before. I said, what I'm going to try to do is to put before the public what I feel is a rational answer to your atheist viewpoint, and then leave it to the public to decide. And his answer was, I'll buy that, let's go. So that's what we did. And I think that's the attitude I want to preserve.
Yes.
In days where people are being no-platformed and university students are afraid of hearing new ideas, I want to say, look, one of the things about Christianity is it allows people to think and to form their own opinions. And I want to be part of that debate. But I want to justify you also being part of that debate, even though you disagree with me. And that's what I understand to be the true nature of tolerance. To tolerate a person is to disagree with them, but support them in them having a public space. We're in danger of losing that, I think.
Yeah, well, I think my success in talking to Christians, for example, correlates with both of our abilities in that conversation to ignore our confidence. and to sort of treat everything as if it could be false. Because Hitchens was right that there is a lot of arrogance and certainty and violence in the history of religious thought, but let's not pretend that he didn't have a bit of confidence himself. I'm not sure. I think a lot of the time people say things like, I always read people who disagree with me, or I always, I put myself in positions where I debate people. And I always think to myself, like, do you really? I mean, do you mean that you meet people who disagree with you and you have like a jousting match with them because you enjoy debate? Or do you mean that you've actually sat with it? I'm sure a lot of people actually have, but I think it happens to varying degrees. And I think when you're watching something like a debate, it is clear to me that someone like Christopher is listening very carefully to what someone's saying and thinking about how to pick it apart. But I can't think of many examples of him listening in such a way as to say, okay, I'm going to consider that for a moment and see what I think about it. It's almost like a lot of it was sort of pre-prepared. And so I've kind of gone off debates a little bit.
Well, so have I.
Yeah.
I've gone off them completely, and I'm so glad to hear you say that. I'm not surprised. I felt that the so-called confrontational debate of the kind that I was invited to do, I didn't invite myself to do them at all.
Yeah.
I was thrust into that position, have serious defects. And one of them is cutting corners.
Yes. Yeah.
Not really listening to the other person and trying to win.
Yep.
When what I feel the best thing is to have a discussion. So for a long time now, I have asked, no debate, let's have a moderated discussion.
Sure.
And the ability to moderate is pretty rare, to moderate well between two people. And Justin is one of the good ones.
Yes.
Bringing
Justin's...
people together is very good. And you're a good one too, if I might say so. And I think one of the things you said a moment ago, I liked, actually, I hadn't heard it put that way before, that we ignore our confidence, that we're not coming into a discussion saying, look here, I know I'm right. We're saying, let's talk about the issue at stake. Let's present our case as best we could.
Yeah.
And have enough confidence in people who are watching or listening that they can make up their own mind.
Yeah, that's in many ways how I feel about this podcast. I've long since thought that the best way to do debates of the format opening statement, rebuttal round.
Terrible.
I thought the best way of doing that would be to produce your opening statement, and then everyone goes away for a week. And then you come back and you do your opening statement, and everyone goes away for a week, and then you come back and you do your rebuttal. And if you want, you can then stitch the videos all together to make it easy to watch, because otherwise, what's the point in presenting ideas? It becomes more about who can think on the spot. It's an ego bout.
It's a test of many things other than the truth.
Yeah. You know what I think it is? I think it's a sport.
Yes.
And I've said this, listeners to this show will have heard me use this analogy all the time. I compare it to a boxing match.
Yes.
And the crucial thing about a boxing match is that it tells you who's the better boxer, but it doesn't tell you who the better fighter is.
No.